has got the facts for you. EX the storyteller, bringing the spark, no one does it better. EX, you've heard the rest, but she's the best, yeah, she's the best. Oh, from ancient tales to modern schemes, unraveling truths and chasing dreams.
Good morning, Keisha.
Sis, how are you? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you perfectly. How are you?
Glad you said you needed a few minutes because I had to run down and find my headphones.
Oh, no problem. I was trying to get you send me such good resources, right? And so I was in here cooking yesterday, and then I said, okay, I got enough time to do the questions, but I started looking over some of your resources, especially about hip hop, and that kind of changed what I wanted to ask. Do me a favor, just tap the screen for me a minute, for a little bit there. Get some likes. That'll help push me in the algorithm. I have to keep my page private because, them tethers, they act a little stalkerish. I don't get why they be sending me friend requests and messages like, I just tore you up on the panel. Are you crazy? I don't want you on my friend list. But anyway, so I have a mix of questions. There'll be some politics, some hip hop, and some early life of New York FBA, the New York community, especially about the Dutch enslavement era and the land that was given to our ancestors. But my focus really is what was life like the nightlife, the music genres that we had, right? I did mention yesterday that I started noticing that the dates of migration for the South, the Latinos, specifically the Puerto Ricans, when they got citizenship, and that island, we acquired the island. And who else was it? The melanated Caribbeans. Because nowadays, and you're from New York, do you remember Puerto Ricans saying they were Caribbean, even though we know they are? Keisha?
I never heard them say that.
Okay, so what they're doing now, and I find it on this app, not specifically like outside my door where there's a lot of other Puerto Ricans, but there are Floridian Puerto Ricans and some other ones saying they're Caribbean. And what I'm thinking is that they're trying to latch on to the heavily melanated folks for whatever demographic or whatever assistance the melanated folks could get them. Sort of a I'm black too, look at me, I'm Caribbean. You know what I'm saying? Because in New York, especially where I'm at in the Bronx, every other house has a Puerto Rican flag. They stand on being Puerto Rican, and they don't talk about being Caribbean at all. In the Bronx, I don't know if they did this in Brooklyn, since like, I want to say the 80s, they've been calling themselves Nueva Ricans, still holding on to the island, but establishing that they're their own entity here in New York. But I'm finding other Puerto Ricans are latching on to being Caribbean, but I think it's just so they can have workhorse and a sort of black card, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Hmm.
Hear you on that. I never heard them refer to themselves as Puerto Rican. That's something new to me.
What you
Uh,
mean, Caribbean?
Caribbean. That's something new. Even when you look at the West Indian Day Parade, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I never saw them waving their flags or anything like that. So I don't know. This is all new to me.
Yeah, because they have their own parade, and we'll get there, right? So that was like an impromptu question. So I just want to say thank you for interviewing with my platform. And before we get started, can you tell people how they could support your platform if you have any small business ventures or even business ventures that you would like highlighted before we get officially started?
Yeah, you can follow me here, Thorough Black Talk Worldview. Also on my Instagram and YouTube. I do have a small media company that produces commercials, if you will, for other people's businesses. So that's what I do. But yeah, just hit me up on Thorough Black Talk Worldview on all social media platforms, and we can chop it up there if you want to.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Oh, and I also have a film right now out on Amazon Prime. It's a short film, about 47 minutes. It's on the trial of Marcus Messiah Garvey. I am one of the associate producers of that film. I have nothing to do with the actors or anything like that. An associate producer are people who funded the film. And so you can catch that on Amazon Prime. The name of it is called Messiah.
Beautiful. I'm gonna check it out. So I want to touch on hip hop really fast, right? So you previously mentioned that hip hop's origins may be in Brooklyn rather than the Bronx, like everybody's been saying, right? So that I'm not against that narrative. Matter of fact, it's not the first time that I've heard that. And so when I started watching the resource you provided, I believe it's called the Founding Fathers of Hip Hop, and they had Brooklynites talking about. They said one thing that stuck out to me that made me say, And they said that Grandmaster Flash, I think it was, and Cool Herc, they don't have anything against Cool Herc, but that they know Grandmaster Flowers and that Grandmaster Flash, I think it is, might have taken his name from Grandmaster Flowers. Now, there's a man named Rap DNA on this app. So when I came on this app and went into, I'm not sure if you met Shavu, but he's a younger generation. I think that's the millennials. From Harlem, and he has actively rallied against the Puerto Ricans, saying it was 50-50. So Rap DNA, when I'm in a position where I don't have the exact answer, but I know what I'm trying to say, and I'm defending hip hop, I reach out to Rap DNA, and Grandmaster Flowers is a name that he has spoken. Also, we say that hip hop started in the South Bronx, but that's only because KRS-One made that song South Bronx, South Bronx, but Sedgwick Avenue isn't in the South Bronx. So if we know that the party that everybody references is on Sedgwick Avenue and that's not the South Bronx, what's to say it never started in Brooklyn? Anyway, so I'm not going to be one of those Bronxites like, no, oh my God, BK, you didn't start hip hop. So I'm open to that side of the story. As long as all roads lead to FBA, I don't care if it was Brooklyn or the Bronx, but I might say the bridge is over. I don't want to hear about Queens right now. But what do you say about that?
Oh gosh.
Good morning, Dread. Good morning, Basic. Keisha.
Sorry, I thought you stepped off.
No, I went quiet so that you could respond and I wouldn't overtalk you.
Based on the documentary that I sent you, and I would encourage everyone to check it out. From the founding fathers of hip hop, that's available on YouTube for you to view. It also won, I think, in 2010, a hip hop a filmmaking award, I believe it was. But a lot of the DJs that they mentioned, I too am familiar with. DJ Flowers, because my aunt, peace be upon her, used to party with a lot of them back in the days. And, so I would overhear, her when she was getting ready to go out, her and my other aunts and so on and so forth, coming up in the 70s. I would overhear, certain things they were talking about. So when I came across that documentary, it was refreshing. One of the DJs that they also mentioned, DJ Shabazz, which is the father of a few of my cousins. Four of my cousins, three of them, excuse me. He has three daughters with my cousin Michelle, is their father. And so I remember when he used to play back in Shady Rest Park in Farragut Projects back in the days. I was a little kid, and my cousin would babysit me. So she would take me with her, over there. And so when I saw that documentary, it was just refreshing to hear that because people don't, people today, you and I come from a different generation, Gen X. We are the go-between, the baby boomers and the millennials. But, the DJs were the premiere of hip hop back then. It wasn't the MC. The MC became the front man later on. But in the beginning, the showcase was always the DJs. The MC used to come and stand on the sidelines and throw some bars to hype up the crowd. And so I just want our younger brothers and sisters to understand that was the foundation of hip hop, and I believe it is also discussed in Tariq's film Microphone Check as well. So you can't talk about the founding of hip hop without the inclusion of those DJs. And so that film, Founding Fathers of Hip Hop, it highlights some of the first DJs here in New York. They even talk about a couple out of Philadelphia and so on and so forth. But, what I'm hearing now, all these other ethnicities talking about they were the foundation of hip hop, that is totally a farce. And I was born in 1970. And so a lot of the things that people are spewing, I can tell you off rip, they're lying.
I'm glad you brought that up about the other ethnic groups, and how they try to lay claim to hip hop. Now we have like South Africans saying hip hop started in Africa, and things that we're doing there, doing here today actually comes from there. My response to that is that it did not come from Africa, but that we had a large Afrocentric community, and our hip hop artists used to pay homage to Africa. Um, I believe that we spent more time around people here in America and they weren't African. So how could we actually retain what Africans are saying we retain to create hip hop? What do you say to that narrative, Keisha?
Um, I can say two things here. During enslavement, you had various sounds of rhythm that took place. Some people will call it call and response. That came out of the enslavement era. And a lot of people, based on their understanding of history, believe that only Africans were enslaved in this country. Africans who were sold off to white planters here in the United States. But, it's deeper than that. Um, and you have to understand that there was an amalgamation of folks who were enslaved. A lot of free black people were kidnapped and sold into slavery. And so there was a mixture of free black people, those who were sold here from the continent of Africa, and you had American Indians who also were kidnapped and sold into slavery. And so you had a mixture due to forced breeding and some love relationships that came out of that. And but those who work the fields, they would call them plant haulers or whalers. You can look at some of the old gospel songs, and they talk about the hollers or the whalers of that time. And so they would enact a call and response based on the rhythm of the work that needed to be done that day. And so you would hear things like, oh, ah, like a call and response to get through the day. And so when I hear people say, well, that came from Africa, no, that came out of the slave fields. In fact, there is a museum in Nashville, Tennessee, the National American Music Museum, that you all can go and visit if you want to. But they do give credit to the African sound. And that is only because the narrative that only Africans were enslaved. But that's why I encourage everyone to do genealogy research, because the further you go back, the more you can see the reclassification of the races were done. You had the Racial Integrity Act of the 1920s that reclassified them again after the economic boom of that time. So we went through a period of 3 racial reclassification periods here in the United States. But that rhythm, that call and response, came out of enslavement. And there is a whole exhibit of it. And they even talk about some of the sound coming out of West Africa. But again, that's only because of the narrative and how slavery is taught here in the United States. And so I personally sent them a letter after I left the museum. I think I went maybe 2 or 3 years ago. But I sent them a letter asking them to do a little bit more research on the enslavement and where that sound actually came from. Believe it or not, they have recordings of those sounds today. People will say, well, how do they record it? I don't know, you ask them. But you can purchase a bracelet once you enter the museum, and you can save those recordings for yourself and bring them back home. They will create a Spotify music list playlist for you of everything that you scan in the museum, and you can bring it back home. I actually have some of that sound here that I brought back home for myself. But that's only because of how history is told. And, I employ everyone to become what Steve Coakley used to say, hunter investigators, right? You see and you learn something, but you have to always dig deeper to find out exactly where that information is coming from and if there is more information that needs to be untold. So, but I would encourage everyone to visit that museum. They give a great exhibit on the founding of hip hop. And I had to, in my letter, question where did they get that information from? And you have to challenge it. And when you do challenge it, you do have to come with resources. And so I was able to provide them with some of those resources. And so hopefully next summer, once I go back down there again, that I will see an upgrade, if you will, in that. When you turn the corner, as you enter, there is an exhibit called Wade in the Water. Wade in the Water talks about the founding of gospel. And they highlight various gospel icons, such as Mahalia Jackson and others in that. But when you hear the sound and they play it next to the field hollers of the enslavement period, you can hear that rhythmic connection. And so it is to show that, whatever we started with, we brought that along with us to this very day. You have the ability to compare persons like Barry White and who influenced him and who his town has influenced. And you can hear the same rhythmic cadence amongst all of them. It is profound. So just getting that out of the museum is great in itself to visit. It's in Nashville, Tennessee. And right across the street from that museum uh, is what do you call a landmark marker of Samson Keeble, which I thought was very interesting. He was a free black man in Tennessee, one of the first in government there, and he, along with persons like Booker T. Washington and others, began to advocate for immigration of black people from around the world into the United States. And some of these persons who come into the United States don't even know this man's name. However, he is the reason why you all were allowed to come here today. And so the city of Nashville is very, very interesting. Just have your wits about you as you move about, especially downtown Nashville, because it is heavily white tea. And I actually had a conversation with a KKK member down there while I was there, believe it or not. But that's another story for another day.
Wow. So sticking with hip hop, what I noticed is we have Tariq Nasheed. He did microphone check, beautiful job. And but what I noticed maybe about 3 months ago, there was a trailer for Paramount, and they are having a film. I don't even know when it's going to be released, if it released or not, because I decided I was going to boycott it because I see the play. The play is Run DMC is spotlighted, LL Cool J. I believe Fat Joe makes an appearance, and they go to Sedgwick Avenue, and the title is Hip Hop Was Born Here. So I figured this is the mainstream media moguls and the mainstream media hip hop artists kind of answering, I want to say answering FBA and Tyreek. Um, and I can only imagine what it's going to say, but I don't want to assume. Have you heard of that film, or do you know if it came out yet?
Oh, this is my first time hearing about it. Um, but I can understand your reason for wanting to boycott it because anything that we do that is exclusive to the masses is always combated. Always has been, always will be. Um, so, in microphone check, I believe, in my personal opinion, that Tariq did a fabulous job in getting some of them icons who started it. However, I wish that he had the ability to include some of the founding journalists of that time, other than Ralph McDaniel. You have people like Doggy Diamonds who can give a profound research and recording based on his involvement of a particular time in hip hop. A lot of people don't even talk about Doggy Diamonds, but I think, in my opinion, that he is a great journalist. I don't know if you all remember Forbes DVD back in the day, but that was founded by Doggy Diamonds TV. And, he too gives credit to persons like DJ Ralph McDaniel. Um, but I wish that maybe that could be a part two. I don't know. But we need to focus on those journalists of that time because they too are very, very important. They wrote the story of hip hop back then. So when you say that this new film is highlighting persons like Run DMC, LL, and maybe Fat Joe making an appearance, um, saying that on Sedgwick Avenue is where hip hop was born, that is a lie within itself. If you go on YouTube right now, and you put in the Jubilaires were a gospel rapping group back in the 50s, and they were out of town. So, you know, don't understand why people say that hip hop began on Cedric Avenue. That in itself is a lie. Go back to look at Cab Calloway and his rapping style back then. He was before, all of this Cedric Avenue stuff even existed. So I don't know why people keep spewing that. Well, I do know why. It's to bury the great works and the minds of foundational Black Americans. It's not the first time. They've always done this in every aspect of life. This is just something different.
Right. And I'm glad you said maybe a part two because as you were speaking, I said that too. And one thing I know is that when two or more minds come together, it manifests. And Tyreek is easily accessible as far as being on these apps. He pulls people up at random and he speaks to them. They get to ask all type of questions. You know what I got to ask him, Keisha? I got to ask him if he could put a hidden history museum in New York for the simple fact I don't like the way New York is turning out. Harlem isn't Harlem anymore. I remember traveling there with my granny as a child. We could walk down the block and church ladies were feeding us. The church had a presence there. They had the kitchens open. We could get food there. Everything was pretty much Black owned, right? We did have our African vendors and stuff like that. But that same side of Harlem, now I went there the other day. I felt lost. I saw all these light skin, brown skin, fair skin people, all these immigrants, and it's like, where did y'all come from? The presence of the church is gone. And it's just not us anymore, but somebody did inform me because I haven't been to Harlem in years, so things do change. But with this change is coming erasure. And that's what I'm totally against. Have you noticed the change? Because I say that, I'm going to just say this. I see that Afro-descended immigrants can be gentrifiers too. And then they say, well, we're not a large number. But when you do the research, although you have to dig, it does say that 1% of immigration, even Afro-descended immigration, can harm a foundational Black American community because it signifies to white tea people that the area is prime for gentrification. So it causes a ripple effect. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Look at Crown Heights, Brooklyn. Crown Heights, Brooklyn um, is now heavily populated with the Jewish people and Caribbean. Prior to their encampment, if you will, of that area, it was foundational Black Americans, mostly doctors, lawyers, and businessmen owned those homes. A lot of mansions reside in that area as well. They, meaning white tea folks, couldn't take it that these Black people in America were doing so well and living so fabulously. It disturbed them, and so they would put print in their media calling that area Crow Heights, saying that it was black as crows, um, and a whole lot of derogatory statements about the people who lived in that area. Um, and so Crow Heights became Crown Heights. But even saying that right now says those Caribbean who live there don't know this history, don't even wish to look for this history, can't tell you about it, but they have the nerve to fix their mouths and saying that they are a power source in that area. They have capitulated to the system, which is why they are still there. I remember when you had the boycotts of the Korean markets back then. It was the Caribbean community who sold out and gave in to the powers here in the city of New York to settle that, while FBAs were on the front lines fighting against it, trying to get those folks out of that area. They gave in, had a meeting, and said that they would cease the protests, cease the fighting. I mean, it was physical fighting. that took place, and they sold out. And so, when you have an influx of other folks coming into areas that is predominantly inhabited by foundational Black Americans, that is to erase you. It is to erase the culture of that area. You don't see anything resembling a foundational Black American in Crown Heights, Brooklyn. When you go along the avenues, whether it's Utica Avenue or Clarkson Avenue or whoever, you see all the flags of all these Caribbean nations, but you never see a heritage flag or a Juneteenth flag. They don't care to know the history. They are there to keep things quiet. They have never, and you hear me clearly, they have never led a force against the system here in the United States by themselves. Ever. You don't see them now. Right now, the Caribbean Day Parade is compromised because the hack community, they have come in and started selling jerk chicken and all kind of stuff on the Parkway. And you see those Afro Caribbeans over there buying from him or them, shutting things down early to appease them. It's crazy. They are not forces to be reckoned with. We have always been that force. Now, you've had a few sprinkles here and there who fought along with us, and I can't deny that. However, the majority have not, and never will. And so, in order to um, cool the fire in the belly of resistance, they brought in this influx of immigrants to replace us, drive the housing markets sky high, the taxes sky high. We are the number one state of paying, taxes, especially if you own property or business here, brick and mortar business. It's ridiculous. And so, they have formed community outreach amongst themselves, um, grant programs amongst themselves, scholarship programs amongst themselves, and they too have excluded us from progress in these areas. So they are, what do you call them? The gatekeepers, if you will, um, the middlers in between us and fighting against resistance here in the city of New York. They have come along and taken up city council seats. Yvette Clark, excuse me, who represents that area, she was able to get that seat after her mother resigned because of the work of foundational Black Americans, led by Attorney Ultimatus. Under his organization, United African Movement, this is a Pan-African or was Pan-African organization, but led by foundational Black Americans. He started the Stop the Yancey campaign. There,
Oh my God. Go ahead, keep talking. Tyreek, we're talking history. You see Tyreek right there? I
no,
don't see him in the box. It says invite Mr. Tyreek Nasheed to join live as a guest. You see it?
but
Go
sure.
ahead, keep going.
But anyway, he started the Stop the Yancey campaign. Um, his name was Jacob Yancey. He was running for that seat. Um, against Yvette Clark. And because Alton started that campaign to get the word out that we got to have a Black face in that area, in that seat, she was able to attain and still holds that seat to this very day. And you will never hear Yvette Clark talk about anything related to this history or anything of how she was able to get that seat and still maintain it to this day. And so that too is erasure of foundational Black American input in keeping the seat of Crown Heights black, but not black that is helping us. Alton used to call folks like this Judas goats. Um, you gotta watch these Judas goats, he used to say. But she is definitely one. Even now, she is pushing uh, for tangibles for her community that excludes us in the very same community. So it is what it is. This is how they've always done it, and we just have to be smart enough and witty enough to, turn the tide. And so with this whole FBA renaissance, that's exactly what it is doing. It is turning the tide. And a lot of them are shaken, and they should be, because we are the driving force of resistance here in New York and in this country. And we're coming back for what's rightfully ours.
Exactly. So I'm glad you touched on Yvette Clark, right? So what I noticed about Yvette Clark is that on Jamaica's Independence Day, she stood in full Jamaican apparel, flagged out, and she stated, shout out to, well, she didn't say it like shout out, but she gave accolades to Jamaica. She said Brooklyn was the, I think, 15th parish of Jamaica. And I just found that horrible. And when I researched her before that statement, I realized she's on the Caribbean Immigrant Caucus, the Haitian Immigrant Caucus, the Congressional Black Caucus. On the New York has a caucus. She's over, I think, a district or two in Brooklyn. And I just want to know. And then I compared her advocacy for the Caribbean we're in Haiti because Haiti's like in a weird place where they could be considered a Latin island or like Latino and stuff. Sometimes Haiti is left on its own, but she decided to take on and advocate for Haiti. So she has effectively secured TPS for Haiti. She secured funding for the Caribbean and for Haiti. And she is said to advocate for us because every now and then she'll pipe up and say that she supports the HR 40. But in all actuality, she's practicing group economics and we're not a part of her group. I don't understand how that's allowed. It's like one big conflict of interest to me. What do you say about that?
Problem. um, we have to be vigilant in speaking out against her. And so that's why, I always encourage us because a lot of people don't like the right. You're a journalist, so you understand what that entails, but a lot of people don't like to do that. But what you could
Miss
do,
Alabamian. I'm listening.
pages and write a diatribe of how turned off you are by those kind of things. We have to use, as Adam Clayton Powell used to say, what's in your hands. What's in your hands. So if you have social media in your hands, use it, not just to come on platforms and argue with folks, but use it as a tool of resistance. We have to use it for as long as we possibly can. So if she's on X, if she's on Instagram, if she's on TikTok, Facebook, I don't care where she at. Go under her post and let her know and tag other state representatives in that post so that they can see what's going on. Let your followers know that this is your plan so that they can attach on to that. We have to use what is in our hands. And social media, as you and I well know, sis, is a powerful tool that we can use to fight against things like this. There is no reason why she should sit comfortable in her seat doing the things that she is doing. Even those who come from the island of Jamaica, if you are in support of maintaining a culture of foundational Black Americans that you and your family love so much that you came to live amongst, fight too with us to show your loyalty for a people who have made it comfortable for you and your family to survive and thrive. So, for example, I'm married to a Jamaican. However, he is 150% on code with his wife. So whatever it is that I am into, that's what he into. And you can ask him. He'll tell you. Ask my wife what she said. Then what she say is what it is. So we have to use allies also who understand what it is that we're going through and ask them to fight along with us. Believe it or not, there are some, not as many as it should be, but few. But those few have them fight with us. One of the women who ran for a congressional seat in that area was Ollie McLean. This was during the same time that Yvette Clarke was running. And Ollie McLean comes from both, she's bi-ethnic, or was, she has transitioned, but part of her family from Barbados, part from the United States, but you would never know it. She never talked about Barbados. She never talked with a Bayesian accent. She never talked about anything like that. Everything was Black American. Everything. She had a school here in Brooklyn called the Sam's Kofa Academy, which educated a lot of Black children here in Brooklyn. Some have grown on to do great things. Some of them are actors and actresses that you may or may not know. Some were stars in Nickelodeon shows back then. Two of Mos Def's children also attended that school. I know that because his children was in the same class with my daughter. So, but anyway, she definitely was on the side of maintaining the culture here in the United States. I particularly remember a meeting that she had uh, allowed the United African Movement to hold at her school. And the conversation turned towards Hakeem Jeffries. Um, and this was when he first came into office. And she went on a tangent about how disruptive he would be in office for Black people. And it caused a bit of a rift because those of us who know who his uncle is, a lot of people in the Pan African community wanted to protect him. But she was having none of that at all. Um, but you never hear her name, Ollie McLean. And Yvette Clarke owes a lot to Ollie McLean, Ultimatics, and the United African Movement. And so it has to be persons like myself who are around back then to tell the story of what was. I think a documentary done on the United African Movement will blow people's minds of how intricate that organization was in fighting against white tea supremacy here in New York. We fought with the MOVE organization in Philadelphia on behalf of Mumia Abu Jamal, and a whole lot of others. When the major earthquake happened in Haiti, it was UAM who were in the forefront of getting supplies to those people. When it happened in North Carolina, it was UAM in the forefront of getting supplies to those people down there, being legal representation for a lot of Black Liberation Army members, some of your local politicians. Um, um, Alton also represented. A documentary on that organization and Alton and Leola Maddox will blow people's minds of the work that came out of that under the umbrella of what they thought Pan Africanism should be. But of course, it wasn't. Um, and the organization fell after sustaining itself for nearly 30 years. Um, and under that umbrella became Friends of Like It Is, who tried to protect the archives of Gil Noble, who I think also was a profound journalist that a lot of people don't talk about. Um, UAM tried to protect um, that historical archive that he had. Um, Also, coming out of that was the Freedom Party, where we formed our own political party and went toe to toe with the Democratic National Convention. And that's a story for another day um, on that, what happened with the Freedom Party. But then also the Freedom Retreat for Boys and Girls, which was established right after the Central Park jogger case, because Alton represented one of the young men um, who was set free, um, Michael Briscoe. And, he went back actually to try to save Raymond Santana. But the Latino community said no. They didn't want his services. They said, we got it. Well, what happened with Raymond Santana? He went to prison, didn't he? So, yeah, so fighting against resistance and having these gatekeepers or the buffer class to come in and not only erase our history and culture, but also give umbrella for white tea supremacy to exude in this country. And you tell me, and I'm asking all the people who listening or will listen later, you tell me what Caribbean group or what African group or what South American group in the States led resistance against white supremacy and were successful. You ain't gonna find it.
I don't know off the top of my head, right? And so, I think that I'm like a know-it-all for the simple fact that I am an Aquarius and I just love New York. You see, my first book has Bronx in the title. I'm always repping New York. I stop speaking to you if you disparage New York to a certain extent because I don't get why y'all be acting like that. With us, foundational Black Americans, I can understand the immigrants, but I have yet to see it. So I can't lie about that. But what I do know is on this app, I get highly upset when I hear other Caribbean talk, especially if there's a younger generation. They say things like, our lingo came from them, our music came from them. And they seem to repeat a lot of stuff that I say on Afro Elite's live. So when they come on his live and they're talking about they're from New York, and they're giving, well, we lived amongst each other and we're so unified, and I give the real history of it, and I tell them how I could tell a cosplayer by the way they tie their Timbs, right? So it always God and the ancestors always guides me to the right spot. I hear them repeating verbatim what I say. I be so tight, Keisha. So, what do we say to the Caribbean who's only been in this city or state for 100 years? Meanwhile, that means we were here for at least 225 to 250 years before they got here, right? My math might be a little off, but we were documented as coming here with the Dutch since like 1626. So, if that was the case and they didn't migrate here until about 1917, then how did we get anything from them? I think they're crazy. But what do you say to especially the younger youth and their elders who are allowing such misinformation to spread like that?
Good question. First of all, that we didn't get anything from you. We didn't interact with you much because you didn't want to interact with us when you first got here. And that's just a fact. Um, there is an article that was printed in the New Negro, a paper, I think in 1963, written by a Jamaican, talking about how Jamaican um, didn't want to be Negroes, didn't want to have an affiliation with him. And actually, he was writing as an ally to foundational Black Americans, giving a warning to them about, his own people and how they have an affinity for whiteness. So we didn't get anything from you. I remember, what was it, back in July, the end of July, we had a family gathering at a family member's house. And one of my older cousins, who I believe she's 88, she started to tell us about the Puerto Rican community in the Upper East Side and how they treated them. She said that her mother, my great aunt Mary, would physically fight with them. They were so disrespectful. How they would call them the N word and all of that. Um, when you look at places like Brooklyn, where both of my great grandmothers are buried here in Brooklyn, about 2 miles from my home. Um, my aunts and uncles talk about a time when in the 50s, they were living in various areas in Brooklyn that were predominantly white tea folks. The Hats, the Italians, the Irish, all lived in these areas. And so they were the minority amongst them. And they talk about how they had to go through things here in this city. And none of those Caribbean folks who were here after 1970 were in the throes of it with them. When you look at um, the blueprint, as you mentioned, growing up in the Bronx, coming through Harlem with your family members and what it looked like back then. Dr. John Henry Clark, in the opening of the Great and Mighty Book, he talks about his southern roots. He talks about what Harlem looked like during his time. We're talking about the baby boomers and the silent generation. What Harlem was to them, um, where they had to fight against white tea folks to establish community. Um, how they had to deal with a lot of the slumlords that came, with living in places like Harlem, and those apartment buildings or tenements back then. They talk about all of this. And that's why I encourage, people to talk to their older relatives who were around back then. They can give you a lot of insight and information. But, I want us to come out of this with a clear understanding that we are the culture, the verbiage that we use. Dr. Ernie Smith, um, he talked about the critique of Ebonics and how wrong that was because we created language out of language, meaning we're all English speaking here in the United States, but we created our own language out of that everybody uses today. If you see other groups walk up to each other and say, "What's up?" How you doing or whatever, they got that from us. It didn't come from you. When you came, well, Afro Caribbeans or whoever, Africans, when you came here, you weren't speaking like we were speaking. You weren't dressing the way that we were dressing. As you said, you could tell by how they tie their Timbs. They're not a New Yorker. I can tell from the walk. I can tell from your look. You're not from here. I don't care how many generations that you are here in this country. I can tell you are not of this walk. You don't move the way my family moves. You don't speak the way my family speaks. Our language that we created to communicate with each other, that a lot of people like to identify as slang. Everybody uses it. You didn't create it, you use it. If you listen to Fat Joe talk, his verbiage is that of a foundational black American. He didn't create nothing. If you came here from a non-English speaking country, if your people came here from a non-English speaking country, you don't sound the same. As a matter of fact, one of the things that burns my belly about those from the Spanish speaking community, they speak with a whine. They're always whining in their tone. Um, and that bothers my ears sometimes. Um, but you don't speak the way that we speak. Everything that you have when you came here, I don't care if it's Afro, Caribbean, Afro Latino, Africans, Italians, the Irish, the black community, the verbiage that they use. We created it. You can look on commercials, TV commercials, and you'll hear using our slang, if you will, to promote their goods. Um, One of the things that Sister Soldier used to say back in the day, she said, white
I
folks be
love her. I love Sister Soldier. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I turn like a fan when I hear certain names, and Sister Soldier is one. Go ahead, Keisha.
she said white tea folks have a habit of coming around you, stealing what you do from you, and then go around the corner and selling it back to you. And that's what the entire world has done. When you look at K-pop artists, um, people in China, people in Japan, mimicking what we created, the style, the walk, the dress, um, um, the handshake, the greeting, giving each other dap or pound. That all came from us. None of you other people were doing that when you came here. You just adapted and cosplayed and then now trying to claim it as your own. But you can't. And the brilliant thing about us as foundational Black Americans, we are always advancing our language. And so, slang of yesterday, it has changed 20-fold already, but identifying the same thing. So uh, we are the creators of culture. And I've traveled to many different countries, and we are mimicked everywhere. Case in point, I was in Jamaica one time. This is in Kingston. And we were at a club and called Quad. And any Jamaicans who are listening, ask your family members about Quad nightclub. Quad nightclub was owned by the Chin family. That's right, the Chin family owned Quad nightclub. But anyway, I'm in the club and I'm just doing a little two-step, got my drink in my hand, listening to the music. But when I looked up, I noticed that the women in the club started mimicking what I was doing. And so I, looked over to my husband. I'm like, "Did you see this shit?" He was like, "Yeah." He said, "I told y'all." He said, "I got the best. I don't want an imposter. I got the best." But I say that to say that we are copied all over the world. When you go to these other countries, they want what we got. They want to dress the way that we dress. They want to sound the way that we sound. And when you go abroad, oftentimes, they will embrace you because they are really fans of who we are. Um, it's when they come here, they adopt a mindset, that they are better than. And a lot of them don't even go back home. I can tell a Jamaican any day, I got more stamps on my passport back to your country than you've done. Your whole family has. They don't go back. They don't go back because they don't want to identify with that anymore. They want to um, show a lifestyle to family members that they're doing great, that they're doing better. Meanwhile, back home, their family members are constantly asking them for handouts, asking them to send them things. But if you send them, regular stuff, they'll be pissed off. They want what we got, what they wearing. I want what they wearing. We used to stay at a particular hotel in downtown Kingston, and it was a favorite place of ours. But anyway, one of the bellhops that you will who worked there, moms used to always wear fresh sneakers. when he went down there, and he would leave them for him. When he left, when it's time for him to go back, he would leave him several pairs of sneakers. And so, he couldn't wait for us to come down there. You know what I mean? So, when it comes to that particular island, they can't chop it up with me because I would embarrass them in a way that they don't want to be embarrassed. So they can't say, we got such and such from them. The hell that's a lie. That is a lie. I've been to Kingston. I've been to St. James Parish, which is what foreigners call Montego Bay. I've been to Trail. I've been through Mandeville. I've been to St. Anne's Parish. I've been to St. Lucia. Pierpoint. Remember we used to have the furniture store here in the States, Pierpoint? And
I
they used to
believe
be
so.
like very unique pieces of furniture and things like that. There's Pierpoint in Jamaica. I bet you won't find black folks living over there. That's all for white tea folks.
Oh, wow.
I know because I've been there.
Hmm.
You can't never tell me no stuff like that. We got it from them. The hell we did. And they still watching our moves. That's why they get so butthurt when they hear persons like yourself or Afro Elite or Brother Leo or Tariq or FBA Wolfie, whoever. They get butthurt when they see persons like us changing the narrative. They can't take it. It's driving them crazy because they can't be a part of it. They
What do
can't
you
be a part of it.
say? But I'm with you there, right? What do you say? Because I too, my children's father is Jamaican, so he might have been in the country maybe a year before I. Coach, I'm gonna pull you up in a minute. I'm doing my one-on-one interview, and then I pull the panel up. Um, and so what? So what I find now is, since I've been on the app, I always state, for full transparency, my children are half Caribbean. They automatically assume that because I have half Caribbean children, I'm automatically in alignment with them. So they don't know how to take me, and it leads to even further issues. Then they assume that me and my children's father had this tumultuous relationship, and that's why I'm telling them the things that I'm telling them. However, you don't find me on this platform disparaging my children's father, Black American men. My father raised me, and my father is very instrumental in why I do not badmouth Black men. I can't say there wasn't a period. Oh, come on. Look, goodness. I can't say that there wasn't a period where I could have been problematic, right? But my father helped me work through certain feelings I had and showed me why it was better to be the bigger person. And I thank God for it because my children are grown, and the only thing they could say about me is I'm the one that encouraged a relationship between them and their father, right? So I don't understand, why do they expect, if I have such a foundational Black American presence in my life, that although I have dated and had children with a Caribbean man, that I'm supposed to automatically take their side? Why do they expect women who have Caribbean counterparts to take their side? I'm a little confused by that.
It's a need to immerse themselves into who we are. Um, when they come here, um, ask them, why didn't you go to Mississippi? Why didn't you go to Delta, Mississippi? You came to a place that was comfortable for you. Whether it was New York, Chicago, or Philadelphia, or whoever. You come to metro cities that are comfortable to you. But what you and those you came with don't understand is we have our own culture. We are who we are. You came amongst us because of that. Um, Go back to the 1920s or 30s or 40s when they began to come into New York, the city of New York. They moved into our neighborhoods. They couldn't go to white tea neighborhoods. They wouldn't have them under no circumstances. We helped them establish a presence here in the city of New York. How? Because, and I did this on my show, I talked about the foundation of the West Indian Day Carnival, parade rather, here in New York. It started in Harlem. It didn't start in Brooklyn. It started in Harlem by a Trinidadian woman, Jessie Waddell. Jessie Waddell um, lived in Harlem, but she couldn't. She wanted to celebrate, her culture, where she came from. But foundational black Americans in Harlem wasn't rocking with that. That's not our culture. We wasn't coming out to her ballroom affairs. That's what they were called back then. Before it wasn't parade, it was called the ballroom affairs. They had the first one at the Audubon Ballroom. The same Audubon Ballroom where Malcolm was unalived at. So she met and had friendships with one of the co-founders of the Amsterdam News. And because she was a part of the nightlife of that time, you have to think now, this is the Harlem Renaissance era. So a lot of intermingling was taking place here in Harlem. One of the great party sites was the home of the daughter of Madam C.J. Walker. She had a party every night, and it was filled to the brim. She had I think it was a 5-story brownstone. The parlor was on the first floor. The school was on the second floor, and the rest of the floors were where the night parties were held. And so Jessie Waddell became friends with the co-founder of the Amsterdam News, her, and a lot of the musicians. And so she asked them, begged them to help her get the word out about her ballroom parties, so that she can have patrons to come in. And so they began to write about those ballroom parties and to entice foundational Black Americans to come out. And that took place over several years. Um, but when it came to fruition, in order for her to get it, jump started and kick off, she had entertainers like Count Basie, that was in Duke Ellington, and the like to come and perform, because they were friends with a lot of the club owners back then. We owned our own clubs in Harlem. All of those ballrooms were either owned by foundational Black Americans or they were managed by foundational Black Americans. And so that relationship helped get the word out about her parties. So that's where it started out. When she wanted to move it outside, it was persons like Madam C.J. Walker who were able to reach out to the city council persons at that time to help her gain a permit to have those ballroom parties on the outside. It started in Harlem. And if it wasn't for the Amsterdam News, Black musicians, and foundational Black American club owners, there would not be a West Indian Day parade or carnival in the city of New York. And that history is not talked about. Even you go to the board of the West Indian Day Parade Carnival, I believe it's on Lincoln in Brooklyn, but it's either Lincoln or Union. But anyway, um, if you go to the board and you ask them, why don't they teach the history about the founder of the parade? Their heads are going to turn like they don't know what the hell you're talking about. Because in order for them to talk about the history of the founder, they have to talk about foundational Black Americans. You see? And see, that's why, when you go to that parade or if you've ever seen that parade on TV or whatever, there's never a float about the founder of that parade. There's not a placard, there's not a postcard, there's nothing talking about the founder, because if you do, you have to give credit to foundational Black Americans That too, sis, is a part of the erasure. You see? So they came in as a buffer class, to erase who we are. And they have to take up with that within themselves. You have to admit, your part in this. You have to admit your wrongdoing. It's just like a junkie. When a junkie goes through 12 steps program, they have to come to terms with their addiction. They have to come to terms with persons that they've harmed. And part of that 12 steps is to go back and apologize to the persons that you've harmed. It's no different here. There is an addiction to foundational Black Americans. It is so usurped into the fabric of this country that everybody is turned out. But in order for them to do right, they have to come to terms with what they've done. You have to admit that you were brought in as a buffer class. You can't find me one Black American. And there are Black Americans who have left the United States and moved to other countries, live in other countries. But you can't show me one Black American who either interjected into the politics of that country they moved to, have a parade in the country that they moved to, usurp business in the country that they moved to. It doesn't exist. We are not a part of that fabric. We don't do things like that. And that's why I always say we are the chosen people. Because everybody is against us. Everybody uses something from us. Everybody is pushing to replace us. Everybody is doing it. It's just not Afro-Caribbeans or Africans or whatever, white tea folks, Asian folks. Everybody's against foundational Black Americans. Everybody feeds off of this culture. Everybody live off of it. And everybody is complicit in erasing the history of who we are.
You know what I say, Keisha? I say it's like foundational Black Americans are getting jumped and still winning. And we see, being from New York, I know we've seen that a lot. When you jump somebody and the person still wins, right? And so I want to go turn and pivot to this. So we talked about how the Afrodescended immigrants may emulate us, but we understand they're not us. And we as New Yorkers understand by the littlest things that may seem normal to outside New Yorkers that we could spot the difference, right? So with that said, there are people who emulate us and get on these here apps and then do things like Cleopatra has done, where she says, I could tell the girl is Southern because the way that she dressed. But we automatically knew that she was a tether. She wasn't raised by Southern grannies because we just, we may go back and forth with the South. But this is how I felt about all of this, Keisha. I could fight with my sister. I could fight with my cousin. But the next day, you better not turn around and fight with my sister or fight with my cousin. So for an immigrant, I don't care if they were born here or not, they're still an immigrant when they do stuff like that. To go against the South in such a manner as if she was a indigenous Black American, foundational Black American from New York. What do we say about things like that? These viral moments, and how do we encourage constructive dialogue when these issues arise? Because those who don't do the proper research or who are not familiar with New York, who may be of the lineage, automatically think that's us or that we allow the tethers to act in such a manner, that we condone it.
We have to operate the same way I said we should with the politicians who interject themselves into politics in various cities and states.